on the thresholds shook at the voices of those who called, and the house filled with smoke. And I said, woe is me, I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. Yet my eyes have seen the King and the Lord of hosts. Then one of the seraphs flew to me, holding a live coal that had been taken from the altar with a pair of tongs. The seraph touched my mouth with it and said, now that this has touched your lips, your guilt has departed and your sin is blotted out. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send? And who will go for us? And I said, here I am, send me.
Would you all pray with me? God, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be pleasing to you. Amen. So first and foremost, I want us to appreciate/marvel at Isaiah's response to God's question in this passage, right? God asks, whom shall I send and who will go for us? And Isaiah responds, here am I, send me. And I don't know about you, but if I was Isaiah, I would have definitely had some questions before volunteering. First, is it a rhetorical question? Because other than the seraphs, Isaiah's the only one there. So is that really a choice he's being given? Can he really say no? That would be my first series of questions. And then second, well, where am I supposed to be going and what am I supposed to be doing? Because that isn't clear from God's question. And third, well, what was the whole point of everything that happened before God asked this question? So today we're going to address each of those questions, and we're going to move in backwards order from the order in which I posed them. So what is the whole point of everything that happened before God asks, whom shall I send and who will go for us? Isaiah has this vision of God enthroned, and the hem of the robe that God is wearing fills the entirety of the temple. These seraphs are attending to the Lord, these angels with 6 wings, 2 covering their faces, 2 their feet, and they're flying with 2. It is a very different picture than most of our pictures of angels, right? They proclaim the holiness and glory of the Lord. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the whole place begins to shake and fill with smoke. And if I was in Isaiah's place, I would be very tempted to turn and run because it seems like the temple is coming down at any moment. But Isaiah doesn't do that. He instead responds by announcing his own lostness and uncleanness, proclaiming that he has seen God. Woe is me! I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. Yet my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. And this seraph, this angel, takes a hot coal with tongs and presses it to Isaiah's lips, announcing that he has been cleansed and his sin has been blotted out. I can't imagine that would have felt too good, but that part in the story is not included. But all of this is what happens before God even says, whom shall I send? So why all of this rigmarole? Why doesn't God just show up and say, hey, Isaiah, I need you to do some stuff. Are you willing to go? Why isn't it just like that? There's this whole elaborate scene, and we could take time picking apart the significance of each of these elements. Why the seraphs? Why do they look the way they do? What's the deal with the robe, the hem of it filling the whole temple, and why the smoke and the shaking? And these are good questions to ask and to process through. But I do think that they can take us away from the most important thing. And this whole scene, this whole setup that we're just dropped into is this undeniable example of God's majesty. God is so big and so otherworldly and so glorified in this passage. And as human beings, earnestly seeking to be faithful, we can sort of understand in our minds that God is both immanent, and transcendent, which means that God is both with us and so close to us, that's what eminent means, and then also so far beyond us, this transcendent God. But even though as humans on a certain level we can understand, yeah, both of those things are true, because of our human limitations, we tend to lean really heavily into one of those depictions of God and can kind of forget about the other. So if you, like me, tend to think mostly of God in terms of closeness and intimacy, the passages like this one in Isaiah are such important reminders that can occasionally correct us. Because here is an image of God that is so transcendent, an image that is a jaw-dropping, awe-inspiring example of God's majesty. And what is Isaiah's response to encountering God in this way? Woe is me, I am lost. He pronounces his own unworthiness and is mystified that he, in his lowliness, has been chosen to see God in all of God's breathtaking majesty and glory. It is this statement of, I don't deserve this gift, but thank you. And as I remarked in my retelling of this story, I don't know if I would respond the same way Isaiah did. I would be tempted to turn and run for sure. And I think this passage invites all of us to consider, what is our first response to glory? What do we do when we're absolutely stopped in our tracks by God's majesty? And I'll guess that most of us have not had visions of the Lord enthroned in the temple, but I do know that we have all encountered glory and majesty in some way. And the natural world for most of us is probably where we've experienced it the most fully. And at first, that may seem like a far cry from what Isaiah experiences here, his vision in the temple. But what is the natural world if not a testament to what our God can do? Evidence that we can touch and see and smell of the beauty and the power of our God. Think about being in a boat in the middle of the ocean with nothing but water as far as the eye can see, and that almost overpowering sense of our own smallness. Think about standing at the base of a massive tree that has been around for thousands of years, and it is deeply rooted even as human civilizations rise and fall around it. Think about peering over the edge of a cliff as your stomach drops in fear and a little bit of excitement as you realize just how far away the ground is from you. I will never forget seeing the Grand Canyon for the first time just a couple years ago. Of course, I had seen photos of it growing up, but they didn't come close to doing it justice. To stand up close to the edge and just look out at this completely unfamiliar, mind-boggling landscape is just breathtaking. I love the Ron Swanson quote from the TV show Parks and Rec, where he says, "Crime, acceptable at funerals and at the Grand Canyon." It's a reminder that for even one of the most traditionally masculine, manly men in recent TV history, there's something about the Grand Canyon and about national parks and about the wonders of the natural world in general that provokes an emotional response. We are confronted by glory and majesty. I don't deserve this gift, but thank you. And there's a lot of different things going on in that kind of emotional response that we have when we're confronted by glory and majesty. There's a sense of terror, an undeniable reminder that we are not in control, that one misstep or freak accident could completely upend all of our carefully laid plans for our lives. There's also a sense of our own smallness, and it's not quite a feeling of insignificance or feeling like we don't matter, but it's a healthy kind of decentering and a reminder that we are not the center of the universe. There's also that jaw-dropping wow, the sense of awe and being overwhelmed at the beauty of the world, and we have been lucky enough to witness God's handiwork. It's a complex emotional response, some terror, some decentering, some awe, some appreciation. And I think this is what underlays that pronouncement of Isaiah's. Woe is me, I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, yet my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. We hear that terror, woe is me. We hear that decentering, I am lost. We hear that awe and appreciation, yet my eyes have seen the King. I don't deserve this gift, but thank you. May we all have the same response when we witness the glory of God, whether it's in a vision like Isaiah's, or when we encounter the evidence of God's work in the world around us, or maybe even in the incredible work that God does through God's people. But after Isaiah experiences this terror and decentering and awe and appreciation, one of these seraphs takes that hot coal with some tongs and presses it to Isaiah's mouth before announcing that his guilt and his sin, this uncleanness that he confessed, have now departed. The cleansing power of fire for driving impurities away is a popular motif, a popular image that we see a lot in the Bible. And used here, it conveys a couple important things. Isaiah is correct. He is unclean. The way he is cleansed happens not of his own desire to be clean, but through divine intervention, divine initiative. And when we really take seriously this image of a hot coal on someone's mouth, we realize that this cleansing, this blotting out of sin, does not come cheaply. And as Christians, we understand this process through the lens of Jesus, right? We are indeed unclean, but through divine initiative, Jesus makes us clean, makes us worthy. But let us never forget that that process is neither cheap nor easy. But in our passage, Isaiah's guilt has departed and his sin has been blotted out. He is being made ready for something big. And then God asks, whom shall I send and who will go for us? It doesn't even necessarily seem like God is talking to Isaiah, maybe. More like he's speaking generally to these seraphs, all these angels that are around. But from Isaiah's response, we know that he at least is under the impression that he is part of this conversation. So we come to the second question I would have if I was Isaiah. If I'm going to be this sent person, where are you sending me and what am I going to be doing? And in retrospect, Isaiah might have wished that he asked that question, because what comes immediately after the end of the passage that Liz read for us is God telling Isaiah, go and say to this people, keep listening but do not comprehend. Keep looking but do not understand. Make the mind of this people dull and stop their ears and shut their eyes so that they may not look with their eyes and listen with their ears and comprehend with their minds and turn and be healed. And Isaiah is clearly not thrilled with that this is the message he's being sent to convey, but he's already volunteered to be the one to deliver it. It is not to fun things that Isaiah is being called. And if you've read the entirety of the book of Isaiah, you get that it is not nice things that Isaiah is being sent to tell the people. It is not good news that they are going to receive joyfully with open arms. And it would be easy for us to kind of sit here and critique the fact that Isaiah didn't look before he leaped, so to speak. It's like, what are you doing, Isaiah? You gotta at least ask what the job is before you sign on to do it. But at the same time, he had just witnessed this incredibly powerful display of God's glory and majesty. And so yes, I joked that I might be tempted to run. I was faced with the same things. It's entirely possible that after all of this, Isaiah wasn't too concerned with what he might be doing. He just knew that after seeing God like this, he wanted to be with God on God's side, no matter what might be required of him. And God often reveals God's very self to us in a powerful way before inviting us, inviting Isaiah, inviting other folks in the Bible to do something big. And after this revelation of who God is, this question of where Isaiah is going and what he's going to do, it basically doesn't matter anymore. The question becomes, after meeting God in this way, how could I possibly go anywhere or do anything other than what God is inviting me to? This is the power of a willing spirit. This is the power of a faith that does not always look before it leaps, because it believes even when it's not called to safe and desirable places, God will be there the whole time, and so it is worth making that jump. And this power of a willing spirit takes us to our final question for the day. Was God's question, whom shall I send? Who will go for us? Was it rhetorical? Isaiah was the only one there other than the angels. Did Isaiah have a choice? Could he have said no? And from my Methodist beliefs, Isaiah absolutely could have said no. The way God phrases the question is invitational. If God was really trying to push Isaiah into it, the question might have sounded more like, Isaiah, I'm going to send you to do some stuff. Now, are you going to get on board, or do I need to shake this building and fill it with smoke again? But the way God phrases the question leads not just to Isaiah's assent or sheepishly going along with it, but Isaiah volunteers himself. Here am I, send me. Isaiah accepts the invitation, even when it's not clear that he's the one being invited. And when I encounter stories in the Bible like this, I always wonder, what if they had said no? Had God ever asked anyone else these questions? Had God invited someone else to be a prophet, and they had just looked around, avoiding eye contact and waiting for one of the seraphs to step up? When the angel appeared to Mary, telling her that she would carry Jesus in her womb, had the angel appeared to other young women who had said, no, I couldn't possibly do that. Do you know what would happen to me? Did Jesus appear to others who had persecuted his early followers, and all of them, up until Saul and his experience on the road to Damascus, dismiss it as just their minds playing tricks on them? We don't know the answers to those questions. We don't know if the ones that we get to read the stories about were the only ones asked, or just the only ones who said yes. But whether or not there are other people who said no before these ones that we encounter who say yes, our God is one who desires that we earnestly seek out a relationship with him, and that we are those who choose to follow God, which means that we do have the ability to say yes or to say no to God. And God is persistent, mind you. So many of us may have stories of our initial no's to God being turned into yeses, because God refuses to give up on us. But we do have that ability to say yes or to say no. God is calling each of us to something. Every Christian has a vocation, something powerful and life-giving that God invites us to. And this call of Isaiah reminds us that before God invites us to something big, God reveals God's very self. Maybe not quite in a way as dramatic as we see here, so let's not all be sitting on our hands until we have a vision of God enthroned, but God does reveal himself in some way. And so the question for us is, how do we respond? Do we dismiss it? look around for someone else to step up, or become so obsessed with looking before we leap and making sure that it's safe, that our feet never leave the ground? Or do we respond to God's invitation like Isaiah does? Here am I, send me. In the words of one of my favorite hymns of all time, may we be those that say, here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord?
Yes.
I have heard you calling in the night. I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I will hold your people in my heart. Will you pray with me? Lord, you do lead us. You do call us. You call us to go. You call us to hold your people in our hearts. Whatever specifics you may be calling us to, may we have the eyes to see the ways in which you reveal your glory and majesty to each of us. And when that is revealed to us, may we respond with, I don't deserve this gift, but thank you. God, may we be those with a willing spirit, the ones who dare to say yes, even when we don't know exactly where we're going or what we're doing. May we have the peace that you go with us and you go before us and you come behind us, so we know that wherever you are leading us is just so, so good. Here I am, Lord. Here we are. Send me, send us. It's in your Son's holy and precious name that we make our prayer. Amen. And I'll now invite our band to come up to lead us in our final song.